January 17, 1952. Above the frozen ridges of North Korea, the sky is a pale, brittle blue, the kind of cold that makes metal contract and breath freeze mid-exhale. At 18,000 feet, the air is thin enough to steal a man's consciousness if his oxygen mask slips even for a moment. The sun hangs low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the snow-covered mountains below. In this vast, empty theater of sky, a single American F-86 Sabre cuts through the silence, its polished aluminum skin catching the morning light like a silver needle threading through fabric. Inside the cramped cockpit, Captain James Jabara hunches over his instruments, his gloved hands light on the stick, his eyes scanning the horizon with the patience of a predator. He is alone. 30 miles to the north, 10 Soviet-built MiG-15 fighters are converging on his position, their pilots confident, their radios crackling with anticipation. They have numbers, they have altitude, they have orders to eliminate the lone American who has dared to venture into their killing ground. What they do not yet know is that they are about to witness something that will haunt their briefing rooms for years to come. A single fighter performing maneuvers that define not just their tactics, but their understanding of what is physically possible. The Korean War had, by early 1952, settled into a brutal stalemate on the ground, but in the skies above the Yalu River, a different kind of war raged, one of speed, technology, and nerve. The corridor of airspace that stretched from the Chinese border down through North Korea had earned a grim nickname among American pilots, MiG Alley. It was here that Soviet-trained pilots, many of them veterans of the Eastern Front in World War II, flew their MiG-15s in aggressive, coordinated attacks against United Nations aircraft. The MiG-15 was, on paper, a formidable opponent, faster in a climb than the American F-86, capable of reaching altitudes that left other jets gasping, armed with heavy cannons that could shred an aircraft with a single burst. Soviet doctrine emphasized numerical superiority in vertical tactics, climb above the enemy, dive with overwhelming speed, destroy and escape upward before the slower Americans could respond. It was a philosophy born from the brutal arithmetic of the Great Patriotic War, where survival meant attacking in numbers and retreating before the enemy could concentrate fire. Against bombers, against older fighters, it worked with devastating efficiency. But against the F-86 Sabre, and more specifically against pilots like James Jabara, the doctrine was about to reveal its fatal flaw. The MiG pilots that morning expected a familiar hunt. Their radar controllers had reported a single contact, an American jet flying alone, isolated from his squadron, vulnerable. In the Soviet tactical mindset, this was not a threat, it was an opportunity. 10 MiGs against 1 American was not a fight, it was an execution. The flight leader, a veteran whose voice carried the flat certainty of experience, issued calm instructions over the radio. Maintain formation, split into 2 groups, execute a pincer attack from above. The lone American would have seconds to react, and in those seconds, he would die. The MiG pilots descended from 25,000 feet.
In the Soviet briefing rooms, pilots were taught that an outnumbered enemy would run. It was rational, it was predictable, it was what every survival instinct demanded. But Jabara did not run. Instead, he pushed his throttle forward, lowered his nose, and accelerated directly toward the center of the MiG formation. The maneuver was so unexpected, so contrary to logic, that for a critical handful of seconds, the MiG pilots hesitated. Their flight leader's voice crackled over the radio, confusion bleeding into his commands. The lone American was not fleeing, he was attacking. By the time the MiGs adjusted, Jabara had already done the impossible. He had turned their numerical advantage into a disadvantage. In the narrow envelope of airspace between the 2 MiG groups, where they had planned to trap him in a crossfire, he had instead placed himself in a position where only 1 MiG could engage him at a time without risking a collision with their own wingmen. It was a move that required not just skill, but an almost preternatural understanding of 3-dimensional geometry, of energy states, of the precise moment when aggression transforms from suicide into genius. The first MiG that tried to follow him into the turn discovered what American pilots had been learning for months. The F-86 Sabre could outturn anything in the sky. While the MiG-15 was faster in a straight line and could climb like a rocket, the Sabre possessed a secret that Soviet engineers had not anticipated: hydraulically boosted flight controls. In a dogfight, where every degree of turn radius mattered, where fractions of a second determined life or death, the Sabre could pivot with a responsiveness that felt almost supernatural. Jabara wrenched his stick hard right, then reversed left, then rolled inverted and pulled through a split S that bled speed but positioned him perfectly on the tail of the lead MiG. His targeting pipper drifted across the silver fuselage. His finger brushed the trigger. 6 .50 caliber machine guns roared to life, their tracers arcing through the frozen air like molten threads. The MiG shuddered, pieces of its tail section tearing away in the slipstream. Black smoke erupted from its engine. It rolled over and began its long, spiraling descent toward the mountains below. On the Soviet radio frequency, the calm commands dissolved into chaos. Voices overlapped, shouting vectors, warnings, questions that had no answers. Where is he? I lost him. He's behind Volkov. Impossible. He was in front of me a second ago. The Americans had a term for what Jabara was doing: energy management. It was a concept that had been refined in the high-altitude laboratories of Edwards Air Force Base, tested by pilots who understood that a dogfight was not just about speed or firepower, but about the careful manipulation of kinetic and potential energy, trading altitude for speed, speed for turn radius, always keeping the enemy in a state of disadvantage, always retaining the initiative. Soviet doctrine, built around the overwhelming numerical attacks of the Great Patriotic War, had no equivalent framework. Their tactics assumed that numbers would always prevail, that coordination and discipline would overcome individual skill. But in the thin, cold air above Korea, those assumptions were being shredded as thoroughly as the MiG's tail section.
The second MiG pilot who tried to engage Jabara made the mistake of entering a climbing spiral, trusting his aircraft's superior power-to-weight ratio to escape, but Jabara did not follow him up. Instead, he rolled inverted, pulled down into a split S, and used the diving speed to reposition below and ahead of the MiG's projected flight path. When the MiG leveled out, expecting to find empty sky, Jabara was waiting. The burst lasted less than 2 seconds. The MiG's canopy shattered. The aircraft snapped into an uncontrolled roll and disappeared into the clouds. 9 MiGs remained. Their formation, carefully planned and executed, had disintegrated into a confused swarm. Each pilot was now flying defensively, checking his 6 o'clock, trying to locate the lone American who seemed to materialize out of nowhere, strike, and vanish before anyone could react. The flight leader's voice, previously so confident, now carried a note of something the Americans would have recognized: fear. What the MiG pilots could not see, could not understand, was the cumulative result of American technological innovation applied with obsessive focus to a single problem: how to make one pilot more effective than 10. The F-86's radar-ranging gun sight automatically calculated lead angles and firing solutions, removing the guesswork that had plagued fighter pilots since the First World War. Its hydraulic controls meant that Jabara could execute high-G maneuvers without the muscle-tearing effort that left Soviet pilots exhausted after minutes of combat. Its wing design, refined through countless hours of wind tunnel testing, gave it stable handling characteristics even at the edge of a stall, where the MiG-15 became dangerously unpredictable. But more than any single technological advantage, the Sabre represented a philosophical difference. It was designed around the pilot, to amplify his abilities, to transform his decisions into instant, precise action. The MiG-15, for all its raw performance, was a machine that demanded the pilot adapt to its characteristics, compensate for its flaws, fight the controls as much as the enemy. Jabara had been in combat for less than 4 minutes, but to the MiG pilots it felt like an eternity.
Another MiG attempted a head-on pass, trusting in the heavy cannon armament to overwhelm the Americans' machine guns, but Jabara had already calculated the geometry. He rolled 90 degrees, presenting the smallest possible target profile, and opened fire at maximum range. The MiG pilot flinched, broke off the attack, and in that moment of hesitation, Jabara reversed his roll and pulled hard into the MiG's 6 o'clock. The third kill came as the MiG tried desperately to outrun him in a shallow dive. The pilot pushed his throttle to the firewall, but the Sabre, diving from higher altitude, had both gravity and superior transonic aerodynamics on its side. Jabara closed to 200 yards, his gun sight locked. The MiG disintegrated in a ball of orange flame. On the ground, in the radar rooms along the Yalu River, Soviet controllers stared at their scopes in disbelief. The single American contact was still there, still maneuvering, while 3 of their MiGs had disappeared from the display. 4, 5. The numbers kept changing, but not in the direction Soviet doctrine said they should. One of the controllers reached for a phone to call his superior officer, then hesitated.
How could he explain what was happening? How could he report that 10 of their best pilots flying superior aircraft were being systematically destroyed by a lone American who refused to follow the script? In Moscow, in the offices where Soviet aviation doctrine was written and revised, this engagement would eventually become a classified case study, an example not of American superiority, but of the urgent need to revise tactics, to understand that numerical advantage meant nothing if it could not be brought to bear effectively. The remaining MiG pilots had lost all cohesion. Some were fleeing north toward the Chinese border, their fuel warning lights already glowing amber. Others were attempting to engage, but their attacks were uncoordinated, desperate, easily defeated by Jabara's preternatural sense of timing. He would pull hard into one attacker, forcing him to overshoot, then immediately reverse onto another's tail. He fought in 3 dimensions, using altitude, speed, and angle in combinations that seemed to defy the limitations of physics. His aircraft was an extension of his will, not a machine he flew, but a machine he inhabited, its responses so immediate that thought and action became indistinguishable. This was the secret the Soviets had not anticipated, that American pilots trained not just to fly their aircraft, but to merge with them, to operate at the edge of human capability where instinct and skill became a kind of kinetic genius. Throughout the entire engagement, Jabara's voice on the radio remained calm, almost conversational. He called out vectors to his distant wingmen who were racing to reach him but still minutes away. He updated his ammunition count. He reported each kill with the same matter-of-fact brevity one might use to report a traffic delay. To the American controllers listening, his voice was a reminder of something that went beyond tactics or technology, a confidence born not from arrogance, but from absolute mastery. The Soviet pilots, listening to his transmissions on the frequencies they monitored, heard something else, the sound of a man who was not fighting for his life, but simply working, executing a task he had practiced so thoroughly that it had become routine. It was, in its way, more terrifying than any amount of bravado. The 6th MiG fell when its pilot, panicking as Jabara closed on his wingman, attempted a maximum G turn that exceeded his aircraft's structural limits. The wing folded. The MiG tumbled through the sky like a broken toy. The 7th tried to escape by diving into the clouds, but Jabara had memorized the terrain from his intelligence briefings. He knew where the clouds ended, knew the altitude at which the fleeing pilot would have to level out or crash into the mountains. He dove through the cloud layer, emerged exactly where he had calculated, and found the MiG 200 yards ahead, still in a straight line, still fleeing. The burst was almost merciful in its brevity. By the time Jabara's wingmen finally reached the engagement area, only 2 MiGs remained, and both were fleeing at full throttle toward the Yalu River, their fuel tanks nearly empty, their pilots silent on the radio. Jabara let them go. He checked his own fuel gauge, low but sufficient. He ran his eyes over his instruments, all normal. No warning lights, no battle damage. His hands were steady on the stick. He had been in continuous combat for 11 minutes. He had fired 1,800 rounds of ammunition. He had shot down 7 MiG-15s.
and he had never been in serious danger.
When he landed at Kimpo Air Base 40 minutes later, the ground crews were already painting 7 small red stars on his Sabre's fuselage. The intelligence officers who debriefed him filled page after page with notes, trying to reconstruct the engagement, to understand how one pilot had defeated 10. Jabara's explanations were technical, precise, devoid of drama. He had used the MiGs formation against them, exploited their predictable tactics, managed his energy state to maintain the initiative. But beneath the technical language was something the intelligence officers recognized but could not quite capture in their reports. Jabara had not just outflown his opponents, he had outthought them, operated at a level of cognitive processing where his decisions were faster, more accurate, more creative than anything his opponents could match. It was the difference between a chess player following a memorized opening and a grandmaster who sees 10 moves ahead, who understands not just the position, but the psychology of his opponent. In the Soviet briefing rooms along the Yalu River that evening, the surviving MiG pilots sat in silence. Their debriefing lasted hours. Intelligence officers asked questions, demanded explanations, sought patterns in the chaos, but the pilots had no satisfying answers. They had followed doctrine, they had maintained formation, they had executed the tactics that had worked against American bombers, against older fighters in previous engagements. But this time, nothing had worked. The lone American had somehow been everywhere and nowhere, anticipating their moves, turning their strengths into weaknesses, killing them with a cold efficiency that felt almost mechanical. One of the surviving pilots, a veteran who had flown Yak-3s over Berlin in 1945, tried to explain what he had felt. It was like fighting a ghost. We could see him, but we could not catch him. He knew what we would do before we did it. The intelligence officer writing the report paused, then underlined that sentence twice. The encounter became legendary in the annals of aerial combat, studied in fighter schools on both sides of the Iron Curtain. For the Americans, it was proof that superior training and technology could overcome numerical odds, that the investment in advanced aircraft, in realistic combat training, in pilots who were encouraged to think rather than simply follow orders, had created a qualitative advantage that numbers alone could not overcome. For the Soviets, it was a wake-up call that led to revised tactics, improved training, and eventually to new aircraft designs that attempted to match not just the Sabre's performance, but the philosophy behind it. But in the immediate aftermath, what resonated was something simpler and more visceral. The image of one pilot, alone in the frozen sky, turning the tables on an entire formation, rewriting the rules of engagement through sheer skill and audacity. The symbolism was not lost on the men who flew and fought in the Korean War. The Sabre, with its swept wings and polished aluminum skin, became more than just an aircraft. It became a representation of American technological prowess, of the belief that individual excellence, properly equipped and trained, could triumph over collectivist doctrine. Every time a Sabre pilot strapped into his cockpit, he carried with him the knowledge that his aircraft was not just a weapon, but a promise, that his life was valuable enough to surround with the best technology his nation could produce, that his decisions would be trusted, that his training had prepared him not to follow scripts, but to improvise, adapt, overcome. It was a philosophy that extended far beyond the cockpit, rooted in the democratic ideal that every individual possessed inherent worth, that freedom meant the opportunity to excel, to be recognized, to make a difference that could not be reduced to mere numbers on a spreadsheet. The 7 red stars on Jabara's Sabre grew to become part of Air Force lore. Each star represented not just a kill, but a moment when training, technology, and human will had combined to achieve something that the enemy's mathematics said was impossible. In the mess halls and ready rooms of American air bases, pilots who had never met Jabara recounted the engagement, embellishing details, turning it into the kind of story that reminded them why they had volunteered for the most dangerous duty in the war.
For the men who flew into MiG Alley each day, facing odds that often seemed insurmountable, Jabara's fight was a talisman against despair, proof that skill and courage could tip the scales, that being outnumbered was not the same as being outmatched. In the decades that followed, as the Korean War faded from immediate memory, overshadowed by Vietnam and the Cold War's countless smaller conflicts, the engagement above the Yalu River remained a touchstone in military aviation circles. New generations of fighter pilots studied the gun camera footage, analyzed the maneuvers, tried to understand the cognitive processes that had allowed one man to dominate 10. The answers were never fully satisfying because the question itself was incomplete. It was not just about what Jabara did, but about what he represented, the culmination of a system that valued individual excellence, that invested enormous resources in making each pilot as effective as possible, that trusted its warriors to make life or death decisions without requiring permission from distant commanders. It was the difference between an air force and an aviation bureaucracy, between pilots and operators, between freedom and control. On that frozen January morning in 1952, high above the Korean mountains, something more profound than a tactical victory had taken place. In the chaos of swirling contrails and tracer fire, in the desperate radio calls and the long spiraling descents of burning aircraft, a truth had been demonstrated with brutal clarity. That when free men are given the tools and the trust to excel, when individual skill is amplified by superior technology, when training emphasizes thinking over obedience, the mathematics of combat change in fundamental ways. Numbers still matter. Superior numbers still confer advantage, but they are not destiny. One man, properly trained, properly equipped, properly motivated, can reshape the battlefield in ways that confound doctrine and shatter expectations. The sun had climbed higher by the time Jabara taxied his Sabre back to the revetment, and in its light, the 7 fresh red stars on his fuselage gleamed like drops of blood against the silver metal, a testament to the morning's work, and a reminder to every pilot who saw them that courage and skill, when married to excellence, can turn the impossible into the inevitable. The secret was never just the aircraft or the technology. It was the unwavering belief that the man in the cockpit mattered more than any equation, any doctrine, any ideology, that freedom, in the end, was not just worth fighting for, but was itself the weapon that made victory possible.